Hello, and welcome to the Understanding Roof Restoration podcast. I'm your host, Karen Edwards from AskARoofer.com. The Understanding Roof Restoration podcast dives deep into the topic of restoring roofs. As the popularity of roof restoration continues to grow among building owners and contractors, there are many questions that arise. With a wide variety of roofing systems on existing buildings and many available restoration options, we turn to the experts at Western Colloid to answer your questions on roof restoration. Greg Hlavaty, Leland, and the team at Western Colloid have been manufacturing and installing these systems for more than 50 years, and they have seen it all. We will tackle a different topic each month and answer questions submitted by you, our listeners. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Understanding Roof Restoration. I'm Karen Edwards with AskARoofer, and I'm love to welcome back Leland and Greg Hlavaty from Western Colloid. Welcome.
Hello. Hey, good to be back.
Good to see you guys. We've got an exciting episode today because we're going to talk about restoring spray polyurethane foam roofing. But I thought before we get into talking about restoring it, maybe you could provide a little education on what spray polyurethane foam roofing is for those listening who might not know.
Sure, we can do that. I'll start off a little bit with, because I have the oldest history here. Again, spray polyurethane foam has been around almost as long as I have in the industry. Maybe not quite, but close. And it is, it's chemistry that through a combination of several. And first, I'm going to say I'm not a urethane foam expert in that industry. I've been associated with it for many years, but I'm not directly involved in it and the specific chemistries that are used here and there and what have you. But early on, it was, a mixture of chemicals that were sprayed in a special gun that mixed these chemicals together at the head of the gun, the spray tip. And once they were combined, they foamed up. It's a takeoff from the foam that was used, when they made ice chests and other things where they filled it with a foam. And foam did a great job of having insulation, a good insulation value. So they started spraying it on many things, cold rooms, tanks, all kinds of things where they needed to control the temperature inside. And it was adapted to roofs. However, in roofs, they found out that foam by itself breaks down quite dramatically when it is exposed to UV, the sun and weather. So in order to use it on a roof, they had to come up with a surface of that foam so they could use the insulation, and then they would put a protective surface on it. And early on, they used some of the same stuff they use today. They used acrylic roof coatings, usually embedded with granules, roofing number 11 roofing granules, just like they use on cap sheet. And they used urethane coating, the rubberized urethane coating, the film urethane, not the spray foam, and that was a very good protective surface. And they also used silicone. It was when some of the first silicone roofs were done back, in the 70s and 80s. They put silicone as kind of the high-end foam. You put a silicone coating on top of your foam. Silicone weathered well, and the foam had strength. And it was a great, and it still is a great system in itself. It gives you insulation and a weather barrier. So all those things lent themselves to putting it on roofs. And some roofs worked better on some than others. Plywood deck roofs were harder to put it on because the plywood flexed and moved. Since then, they use it mostly for, at least in the Western U.S. where we're at, as re-roofs. They go over old existing roofs and what have you. And they'll put it on metal roofs. Some of these things can be problematic. The benefits of the foam roof is that you get insulation and a good weather barrier and a fairly strong roof. And they've improved the foam over the years, the chemistry of it to make it stronger and denser. Early on, the foam would break down, the cells would kind of open up, and instead of holding out water, it would actually suck in water into the roof. So that's why they needed that protective surfacing on it. So as long as you have a foam roof and you keep that protective surfacing on, you've got a pretty good system. What we found over the years is that once that protective surface breaks down, you can have a real nightmare because it can be not the easiest roof system there is to make repairs, and so maintenance is the word for foam roofs. There are some people that every so many years, whether it's 7 years or 8 years or 9 years, they recoat their foam roof and they can make them last a long time. But very few people keep to that, so they end up with foam roofs that are degrading. Once it becomes exposed to the UV, we call it, it becomes friable and it breaks down. Um, uh, the fire ratings and that Hal knows a little bit more about that has always been issues with foam roofs because foam early on didn't have a fire rating. They relied on um, the surfacing, right, Hal? I mean, that's probably where they used the granules. They put heavy granules on it and coatings. Some of it was for bird proofing, but anyway, that kind of brings us to where we are today. There's still a lot of foam roofs out there, and it's the ones that haven't been treated well. And they are some of the most problematic roofs we run across. Some are not savable. Some cannot be saved. They've deteriorated to such an extent you can't save them. The foam is broken down. It is soaked up water. Has become a sponge.
That's a good segue into the next, question. Some of them are savable. So how do you know? What kind of things are you looking for if you're called out to look at a roof? As a contractor, how would we know if this roof is a candidate for restoration?
Well, it's very hard to actually know. I mean, this is probably the hardest roof to read. You can go up on a built-up roof and you're going to look around the drains and waterways, and you're gonna see the deterioration in what's happening. But these foam roofs, like Greg said, they were their Cadillac back in the day. And if you had a urethane on top of it, it was amazing. Silicone worked very, very well. But it was supposed to be a closed cell polyurethane foam, and it turned out not to be. So these things can hold water forever. So, we look at these things and we have contractors going over them. We do them every year. Sometimes we won't know that a contractor is doing it, and you'll come back and say, this thing's blistering up, because we put a fully reinforced membrane over the top of these foam roofs, a waterproof membrane. There's no place for that water to go. And a lot of these roofs, like Greg said, are metal decks. So the water can't go down. It's got to come up. So when these things heat up, these things start to blister all over the place, right? And it's aesthetics mostly, but they are holding water. And you can't normally tell where that water is being held. And they can hold water for a decade. And, the blisters, everyone wants to cut them out. And sometimes if the weather's good, you can cut them out in the summer and try and let that roof bake out a bit and then cover it back up, put a membrane over the top of it for the fall season. But yeah, these are, we're not super concerned about a roof holding a ton of water, a built up roof, but a foam roof, we're always concerned about it. It's the only roof we really want to know what's happening as far as moisture content.
Right.
Is it possible to make repairs for the roofing system, prior to restoring it? Like you said, sometimes in the summer, maybe you could cut that out and get through. But what are some best practices in prepping that roof for a restoration?
Well, they'll do moisture scans, right, Hal?
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's where we'd really, we'd like to see one.
Yeah, they can do moisture scans, and then what happens is they might cut out just sections. We know we've got moisture here. They'll cut it out, and they'll refoam, maybe that 3 foot by 3 foot or 6 foot by 6 foot area with foam, trying to bring it back to the same level as the existing foam, and then we can apply, one of our reinforced coating systems, our fluid applied reinforced roofing, and and that's the good news about foam roofs. The good news about foam roofs is they've already invested money in some insulation on that roof. And so often when it's bad with blister, with some moisture, holding moisture or they see a little foam exposed, small amount of foam exposed can be remediated. They can brush away the dusty foam, what we call fried foam. Or, they'll brush it away with a broom. Um, the and then they will, put one of our systems over. The good thing is now they've got that insulation that they don't have to throw away. They don't have to haul that to the dump, which is expensive too, because many foam roofs were adhered directly to the deck, and they're not easy to get off. So it's expensive to remove one. But then when we put a membrane over it, now they've got a new membrane on top of it. They let the foam does what it does well, which is insulate, and they've got a membrane that will not crack and split like the old original. Because on foam roofs, they just put a coating on. They didn't put a reinforced system on most of them. We do have a lot of roofs in Arizona. They use cementitious coating on, which is where they took foam, they put a coating down of different types. Sometimes it was asphalt emulsion, sometimes it was a urethane type coating, asphalt modified urethane, different thing. And then they broadcast rock, either small rock into it or granules. And then they took a white cementitious coating, which is a mixture of white cement, lime, maybe sometimes perlite, but a vinyl additive. If it's done well, it had a good acrylic or vinyl additive, and that put a real good UV barrier on top of that. But that crumbles over time. It's not elastomeric. It is a hard brittle. So it did a good job on the initial foam roof, and those roofs have lasted a long time. But now they are breaking down, and so we do a lot of remediation of those where they have to prime that crumbling cementitious coating with one of our primers, or we make a primer from our asphalt emulsion to bond that down, and then we put our membrane over. But again, the good news is now we've got a membrane on there that they can maintain for decades, and they've got a foam that they invested in years before that they don't have to throw away. Because the other option is if you talk to a foam contractor, and if there's some of the people that do foam also, they're sitting there raising their hand saying, wait a minute, Greg, we remediate foam roofs, and they do it usually by scarifying the foam. And scarifying means they have a machine kind of looks a little bit like a lawnmower,
like a lawnmower. Yeah,
it's got blades on it that grind down into the foam, and they grind it down till they get to a good layer of foam. And then while that is very fresh, they put another layer of foam over it and then recoat that. So that's an option. It's not one of our options. We're not in the foam business. We are a member of the SPFA, Spray Foam Manufacturers Association, and have been for decades. We like being a member. We like the association. It's a great group of people. But we're there because we're a repair product for people that have foam roofs, and one of the avenues that you can take to repair a foam roof. Like I said, the other way is to use a foam contractor that will scarify it and then put another layer over it if it isn't too far gone. So
that can be problematic too, because it's hard to get adhesion on a 20-year-old foam roof, even if you scarified it, right? So you expose this fresh closed cell polyurethane, and this is a real art form, putting on a foam roof. I mean, we've got them all over Northern California, Southern California, into the desert, and there's probably a dozen applicators over the last 20 years that did a good job at it. Most of them are horrible.
Oh, no.
It looks like the surface of the moon. They are cratered. They are highs and lows. If a good foam contractor, when he goes out to a job, he has a little weather station built onto his equipment. He knows the humidity, he knows the air movement, the wind speed, everything that goes on, and he records that for future reference, if there's issues that come up. But all that matters. But most of the foam contractors have a pump, one of the expensive spray guns, or maybe not even the expensive ones, and barrels of part A and part B.
A and part B.
And
Yeah.
they get out there and they spray it on like they're spraying coating on. And Hal's exactly right. A good foam applicator can put it on and it's beautiful. It lays out beautifully. As a matter of fact, I have many pictures that I have to call up that I'll look at and I'll say, what kind of a roof is this? Because it is really smooth, but I was told it's a foam roof. No, that's a foam roof. It was just done well, really well. But there's other roofs, you have no question about it. It's a foam roof, and it was done by somebody that was not the
they
best.
They were hungover or didn't care.
Yeah, it was a Monday morning, and he should have stayed home that
day. So we're going to talk in just a minute. I'm going to take a quick break here because we're going to hear a message from our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about some of the remediation and things that need to happen before you can restore that roof. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by AskARoofer and Western Colloid Fluid Applied Roofing. When you're looking for answers for your roof, what better place than AskARoofer.com? If you are looking for answers on restoring your commercial, industrial, or low-slope roof, look no further than Western Colloid. For over 50 years, they have been bringing old roofs new life. Together, we're helping contractors, building owners, property managers, architects, engineers, and consultants choose the best commercial roofing system. Find Western Colloid today on AskARoofer.com.
Okay, we're back, and we are talking about restoring spray polyurethane foam roofs. And we've learned so far that they're quite popular. When they're done right, they're great. But more often than not, many of these roofs were not installed ideally. And in those situations, there does need to be some remediation. We talked about scarifying, which, is kind of getting down on the roof and cutting until you get to a good level. But I'm curious, what other things do we need to be looking for with these roofs? You talked about the foam holding water and collecting water. Are there other issues that we need to be aware of?
They're the same issues, right, Greg? I mean, you're really paying attention to drains and the details. It's like any other roof, but these foam roofs can hide a bunch of secrets. Unlike a built-up roof.
And so many of the foam roofs, especially the ones that were not originally done as foam, and there's not that many of them around that were, the first roof is a foam roof. It's always the second roof, So what they've done is they've sprayed around. So the proper way is like with any other insulation, like with the new insulation laws that are out there now, regulations, is that you raise the curbs, you raise the pipes, you raise the roof jacks. I can't tell you how many times we get up on a roof and the T-top of a roof jack is about half an inch above the surface of the foam. If you get enough rain, it's going to drain into that. So all those things need to be cut out and replaced. And they don't always have to be replaced with foam. The nice thing is now there's lots of foam kits that you can use. Everything from a whipping cream can of foam that you just turn upside down and the nozzles for filling cracks and those kind of things and voids, up to little small spray kits where you can spray a larger area where there's 2 bottles that connect together with a hose and it comes with the kit and you can fill it. But there's other ways also. And what we've done over the years is if you've got blisters that you cut out, which a blister in foam is usually the foam and the coating itself might be 2 inches thick or 1.5 inches thick. You cut that out. Now you got a void. So you want to fill those voids, and you can fill it with foam if you're good at it. And even if you're not, you're going to fill it with foam and then you're going to shave the top off because it's not going to be smooth. Or you can fill it with mortar. A lot of people will use a lightweight mortar mix with cement and perlite, or even just the same kind of patch that they use. Guys that do tile work when they do the eaves and ridges, with tile, they have a mortar they mix up and put the tile. You can use that. That's a little heavier, but it cures out fast and it sets up, and you can fix those voids and the low spots that you've cut out with foam or a mortar, a lightweight mortar, and then you can go over it with a system. You can, we have our acrylic mastic is used heavily by people that do repairs to foams. It's a water base. It is very elastomeric. You can cracks and splits and small depressions if they're not more than 1/4 of an inch thick that you're going to put on. and polyester fabric. You can fix a lot of things on a foam, and you want to go up and really walk a foam roof like you do a BURF and fix all these spots first. Hit it, and if you're cutting out T-tops and other types of flashings that you got to raise because the foam is too high, and sometimes the problem is it's skylights. The foam where a skylight works, it's got a nice curb there, and the water runs around it when it runs down a roof. With foam, sometimes they filled it within a half an inch of the top, the edge of the skylight. When it rains, it's going to run up and into it. So those things have to be addressed. But the other there's another positive to foam roofs, and that is drainage. It's they've put foam around drains and around crickets, down crickets. They'll come right to a drain or a scupper, and it'll just die off into the drain. Well, now we know if they're holding water on that, you can take that foam that might be, if it's properly done, at least 1.5 inches thick, and shave that back 2-3 feet out onto the roof and actually make a nice drain sump where you can create positive drainage on a roof because you got a lot to work with that foam. And then we'll put our system over it. However, go ahead, Hal.
I just wanted to make a point, and when Greg's talking about cutting up around these T-tops and pipe flashings, and those are things that let the building breathe through the roof, right? We're normally on a built-up roof or TPO roof or PVC roof, and the membrane is it's that thin. But a foam roof, you're filling a hole that's that big. So I just want to make sure that everyone understood that.
For those of you that are only hearing the recorded, he's holding 2 inches thickness from a 1/4 inch thick or an 1/8 inch thick.
Yeah, quite different.
We're filling these huge voids. That's why these foam packs, are convenient, or you can even fill with board stock insulation if you can fill the void, tightly like that, and then you put a membrane over the top of it. But
flash it in.
It's a lot of detail work there.
Yep.
Are there times when on a foam roof that you can get away with just making some repairs and maybe get a few more years out of it? Or is it better to, hey, we're going to make these repairs, let's put a new system on top of it? What's the best thing to do there?
There's, that's an answer that has a whole bunch of ifs in it. And so part of it is how much the building owner can budget. And part of it is, how long do they care about this? That's another problem. If you have a building owner that's only going to have this building for 2 or 3 more years, then he kind of doesn't care. Or maybe he doesn't have the money. So depending on how far gone that foam roof is, and in Arizona, this is pretty regular. They go up and do repairs and just put another layer of coating on it, not reinforced or anything else. And if it's done early enough and often enough, that can give you a lot of years of a foam roof. But we're probably talking about roofs that have already gone beyond that. So if you're gonna spend 2/3 of the money doing the repairs and using half the amount of coating, just putting the coating on it, you might spend that other third of the dollars. So part of it is, dollars, years, the knowledge of the contractor, and the life expectancy that a building owner expects to get out of that roof. But sometimes it is a waste of money. If you were going to spend, $20 on a system that's going to give you a complete membrane, and $14 on a roof that's just going to repair it, sometimes it's best to spend that extra $6 and get the whole package, because you're talking about 10 to 20 years against 3 or 4 years of extending the life. So, we can't answer that equivocally, but it depends on all those factors. But usually it's better to, once you've got that and you want to save it with something that's going to last.
Are there typically incentives for a building owner? Not that we're accountants, not that we're, giving advice, but for, putting that new, maybe slightly more energy efficient roof, reflective system. Are there ways that they can save money in the long run with that?
Well, foam roofs started out that way. When there was insulation and you got credits for different, sometimes it was cities, sometimes it was agencies. Nowadays, you've already got that foam roof on, and I think next month we're going to be talking about cool roofs and why they and how they work. But you definitely, part of the way insulation works is how big of a battle does it have? Because insulation works through R value, resistance to passing heat through to the membrane, right? So if it's got a lot of heat that it's fighting, there's going to be more heat that comes through that roof. And the way insulation works, you can dramatically increase the insulation value, or the value of that. Actually, it's the value of the insulation you put up there, really. I'm going to get more value out of it by putting a cool roof over the top, because then it doesn't have to work as hard. You know, so you definitely want to put some sort of a cool roof over a foam roof. You want to let that foam have to fight as little heat as possible, and it gives you more value. It really does its job better. You could go up there and waterproof it with a black roof or a dark colored roof, but then you're diminishing the value of that foam, because it's trying to keep out 180 degrees instead of 105
Right.
pass through. So it only makes sense to use a cool roof.
Always use a cool roof on a foam roof. I mean, we use a cool roof on every roof, right? But
Yeah.
foam is hand in hand. It's part of the.
Anecdotally, I'll tell you another little thing that we did for years on some foam, not on all foam roofs, but on certain foam roofs, and they didn't know how much moisture was in it. They used to put a very light layer of our asphalt emulsion, very thin layer, just to turn it black, or mostly black. And the first hot day, you could walk up on that roof and find every blister on it, because you got it hot. You turned the water underneath into vapor, and then they knew exactly where to go to cut out the blisters. And I'm not sure it's a cheap and dirty. It's for sure dirty, but it's a trick to using a moisture scan. And it finds every one of those blisters. You go out, you cut them out, you fill it with a dry foam or board stock or something else, and you've now you've already primed the roof, and so you then put your system over it. But we had several contractors that use that as a tool to find problems. But it tells you what happens when you get a dark roof on foam and there's a little bit of moisture in it. Now you're blowing up water vapor everywhere. So
Right.
You want to keep it cool. You want to let it do its thing.
Excellent. Yeah, that's kind of smart. Before there's technologies now that will help you identify those areas, but there's kind of that, I won't say old school method, but sort of tried and true. And then you've already got the priming out of the way if that acts as your primer. So I like that. Well, this is a good segue, because we're going to be talking, as you mentioned earlier, Greg, in next month's episode about cool roofs, about upgrading for energy efficiency, and why it can make such a big difference in a building. And remember that we want to answer your questions too. You can submit questions to us on AskARoofer.com. You can go to westerncolloid.com. And if we use your questions, we will send you a gift. And everybody likes to get gifts. So be sure to think about what you want to know, send your questions in, and we will answer them. And please be sure to listen to this episode and previous episodes on your favorite platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you'll find us there. You'll also find us on AskARoofer.com and on westerncolloid.com. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Hal. It's been great talking to you about spray polyurethane roofs. And we'll be back next month talking about cool roofs.